It's been a wild few months in the AI coding ecosystem, with the biggest players racing to outdo each other. Cursor is leveling up fast and gaining market share as the go-to AI editor, while GitHub claps back with their own revamped Copilot and their own rapid prototyping tool, Spark. Aider's new architect mode is setting new standards, and O1-based coding is changing the AI coding game before the official model has even dropped. And then there's Anthropic, quietly releasing powerful bash and editor tools that most engineers haven't fully appreciated yet. With all these moves, my own AI coding workflows have transformed completely. Today, I'll share one of my fine-tuned AI coding development workflows to show how you can do more, code faster, get more done in less time. Great AI coding is much like great engineering. It all starts with a great plan. So our goal today is going to be create a simple generative AI UI client server application. It's going to be built with a simple chat interface that allows us to prompt specific generative UI components. We have a simple Claude chat application. We can type hello, and we'll get back the typical response. I've been eyeing the generative UI pattern for a while and finally have a use case for a product I'm building. OpenAI just released their GPT search, and you may have noticed they're using some version of generative UI with a few of their components. To build this, we're going to use a combination of my favorite AI coding tools, Aider and Cursor. It's just too early in the generative AI age to think you can confidently pick out the single best tool for any problem. I recommend one closed source and one open source tool. So here's the outline for the plan we're going to execute on today. This specification or plan consists of 3 sections. We have our high-level overview. This is the high-level steps we're going to take. We then have our team, which is our set of AI agents that we're going to delegate all of our work to. We're using architect mode in both of our scripts here. The Aider architect mode is game-changing and leads to high quality code generation. We'll circle back to that in just a moment. And then lastly, we have our task breakdown. And in the task breakdown, we have our setup step and our individual tasks. Each task has a high level item and then the actual AI coding prompt that we're going to execute. So you can see here we have all the work we want to get done in a mid to high level outcome and then a low level detailed prompt. So here we're going to operate with 4 agents total. We're going to be using 2 Aider instances, one for the client, one for the server. And then we're going to be using Anthropic based document editor agent and bash agent. SH scripts, Aider client here, SH scripts, Aider server. Okay, so we have our client editor on the left, server editor on the right. And then let's open up 2 additional agents. So this is our document editor. I'll run sh scripts doc, get this started. And this is a AI agent that wraps Anthropic's file editing tools. We'll do the same with the bash agent. Same deal, scripts bash. It's the same type of wrapper, but this wrapper is around Anthropic's bash editing tool. Let's start with the setup. So let's add our context to our client and server. We'll say add server slash, and we can open up our file editor here, front end and the source directory. And then we have a couple server items in the server directory. So you can see we have the LLM and the server. Add source, and in Aider you can recursively add files by just specifying a directory. You can see here we imported all of our files into the chat, and all of these are now editable on both instances. We're going to add a couple additional items. So we want the server to be aware of our Gen UI chat, but we don't want to update it. I want to separate the concerns here into server only and client only. This allows us to move faster and reduces errors. So I'm going to say /read only. And we're going to add this Gen UI component as a read-only context file. And same thing on the left side. I want to actually read only all of the server files. I'm just going to say server slash and then start. So you can see we now have these 2 read-only files and we have the 1 read-only here. A couple things we're going to do now. We need to get some documentation around how to use tool calls with Sonnet. And we also need to add documentation around using dynamic components in Vue.js. Many front-end component frameworks will have support for some type of dynamic component. We're using Vue.js for our front end and we're using Express for our back end. Documentation collection is a common pattern when you're integrating with third-party applications, so much so that I've built out a tool to help me collect information. I highly recommend you set something like this up. Gathering documentation and having it local on your device means that you can pass in the context into your AI agents. So in order to pull in this documentation, you can see I have this empty AI docs directory. I like to set this up in every code base that I work in now. And what we're going to do is just scrape a website, add the content here, and then have our file editor agent clean it up so that it's easier for other agents to read. So we're going to do that now. Let's open up a new terminal here and run the following commands. We're going to use Anthropic's tool use docs to generate the generative UI components automatically for us. And so what we're going to do here is just collect tool use documents. I'm going to run .im. We're going to run allo1. This is a new agentic tool I'll be discussing on the channel more in 2025. We have this command collect, and now we pass in a URL. And so all we're going to do here is take the URL for this, and we're going to run this collect method on this, and then we're going to save it to our AI docs in tool use raw.md. So this is going to scrape this URL for us and place the content in our tool use raw. So you'll see this come in here, and you can see that that's done. So this is great, but you'll notice that there's 9K tokens in this file. It's messy. It's got a lot of content that we don't really care about. This is where our file editing agent is going to come in and clean this file up for us. So if we go back to our specification document and run our next command, we're going to ask our editor agent, read the tool use raw, and then create tool use MD with examples and docs specifically around tool use. So we'll copy this and go to our file editing agent and just paste this in and run it. And so you can see our Anthropic file editing tool thinking through what needs to happen here. You can see it's running the view command. I'm going to link the previous video where we discuss the Anthropic tools, specifically the editor and the bash tool, that are super underrated, super underappreciated. That'll be linked in the description. Definitely check out that video. This is a huge, huge win for engineering. And so right now it's scraping and it just wrote this brand new file. And let's go ahead and hop in here and we can see how much cleaner this looks, right? We're down to 1.4K tokens from 9K. And if we just scroll through this file, we can see how much cleaner this is and how much value we can get by asking a file editing agent to clean up the larger markdown file for us. So all we did was write a prompt for this, and the Sonnet file editing tool now has cleaned up this documentation for us. It's got a ton of great breakdowns for us. It's even got their links to other documentation in here as well. Let's go ahead and close these files, and we're going to repeat this process for the Vue.js dynamic component, because this is what we're going to use to automatically swap out which generative UI component gets generated. So we'll run the same process here. We're running our collect URL, and then we have our output file. So I'll just copy this, go back to our blank instance, paste this. Let's go ahead and get this content scraped into this file. You can see that that's done. And if we scroll, not too bad, only 1,300 tokens, but let's run our file editing agent to clean this up for us. Same deal. I'll just hop back to the file editing agent, paste this in, and now it's going to generate the non-raw formatted version for us. So our Anthropic file editing tool is reading in the raw format and then creating this new document with examples and docs specifically around dynamic components. And then it's going to clean it up for us so that it looks more like this, right? So this is the new reformatted version. You can see how clean this is. It's easier for you and I to read, and that means it's likely easier for a large language model to read. And this is great. In this developer workflow, it works like this. First, you make a plan, right, which we have here. Then you collect all the information, you get it into your code base. Now we have our AI docs. Then you run your prompts. Let's move back to our Aider assistants. For Aider to see these files, we need these files committed. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run a /run get stage dots. Now we should have access to /read only and AI docs. There we go. Now we can see all of these files. For the front end, we only want the dynamic components. So we'll just add that formatted file. And for the back end, it's /read only, the AI docs, tool use, markdown file. Now we have all of our collection complete, right? Our AI coding assistants have everything they need to accomplish the tasks we want them to accomplish. Let's go ahead and shrink our screen here and get to work. So we'll close this, get back to our Gen UI chat, and let's move to the actual task execution. So I know you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of setup, but this is going to be worth it for us as we're just going to start rolling through these AI coding prompts. It first will be helpful to just look through what we have so far. So if we open up server, you can see we just have this simple prompt endpoint. And this prompt endpoint is just hitting a classic Anthropic chat call. What's your favorite programming language? It will, create this typing interface and then give us a, stock. I don't have a favorite because I'm an AI assistant, blah, blah, blah. This is what's happening here on the backend. We just have our LLM file and we have our server file as well. And our front end looks like this. So this is a Vue application. Frankly, all the front-end frameworks are converging to basically being the same thing now, so it doesn't really matter what you're using. If we open up our template, you can see we have our list of messages and we have our input field. Pretty simple. You can see we're looping through a bunch of messages and displaying them. So let's go ahead with our first change. The first thing we need to do to get our generative UI is create a new tool endpoint. My approach for creating generative UI components is to make every response that we're getting back a tool call. So let's just go ahead, copy this, paste this in. Let's let Aider get to work. And then let's open up server so that we can see these changes get streamed in. And we can full screen while we're working on this. Earlier, I mentioned that we're running in architect mode. This is an incredible mode that Aider has that essentially runs your prompt twice. Once as a planner, and then as a editor. And you can see here we have a linting issue. It didn't get imported. This got automatically fixed. Aider saw that, automatically fixed it. As you'll see in a moment, inside of our scripts here, instead of our setup scripts, we are automatically having Aider self-correct itself and confirm every change that it wants to make. Let's go ahead and close this. We'll get to that in a second. So if we review our changes, you can see we have this new tool command. We can go ahead and auto import this. And we actually want to import this from our tool file. Let's make sure that this is exported. And so now we have that tool there. We can see we have our new /tool endpoint, and we're passing in our tool parameter. If we hop into our tool prompt, we can see we have this brand new tool created. We are missing the tool call here. So we can just go ahead and add this, right? We can just do force tools. And then we also want one more thing. If I remember correctly, we want to use the force tool mode here. So we can pass this in here. So if we say a tool choice, because we always want this to run. This is something that we just missed in the prompt. I always want this tool to execute every single time we call this. We have the wrong tool type here. I think we probably want Anthropic's tool. So we'll just say, I believe we can look for Anthropic.messages.tool. There we go. And then we can update our type here. We can actually just get rid of this type. Yeah, just completely get rid of this. And then we can just have our server also import from here, and yeah, there we go, get our tool. Using cursor here to tap through changes. And now we can see we have our generative UI component that's getting passed in, right? And the idea here is quite simple. Basically, you have a tool that will always run and generate one of these items, okay? So let's go ahead and hop back to our spec documentation. This was our first prompt. Let's go ahead and run our next one. So now we're going to go to the client, and now we're going to ask our client to actually use this tool call after the enter key is pressed, right? So you can see this prompt. This is exactly what this is going to do. Let's go ahead and open up our editors here, and let's run our client side now. Right at the left is the client. Let's go ahead and execute on our client side. And we're going to update this component and call /tool instead of, if we run that and quickly switch back, we are running /prompt right now. So we're going to go ahead and run this, and great. So now this is running /tool. We saw that get updated, and let's go ahead and just see if we can run this now. So we'll refresh, we'll type hello, and you can see there we have an empty response. So let's go ahead and figure out what's going on here. Printing out our data, let's just go ahead and see what's in this. And response is just an empty string. So let's go ahead and clean up our response format. Okay, so this is what's happening, right? Let's change this. What we're actually looking for is, we always know this is going to be a tool use return. And so we just want to pass back this entire block. Refresh and type hello. Wonderful. So now we're getting that entire response block back. If we look at this, you can see we're getting that tool use response back from Sonnet, which is perfect. And you can see we're calling this component type text, right? So we just passed in hello, forcing the execution of this tool to run every single time. And if we hop back to server where this tool lives, the component type is always going to be one of these enums. So we're having Sonnet pick which one of these UIs do we want to generate based on the incoming prompt. So if I type something like, I want to leave a rating, you can see we're going to get this component type star rating, okay? So this is really cool. So we can also get the color picker and the contact form. These are going to be components we'll be, having our AI coding assistants automatically generate for us. And then we have just the plain old text response. I think as a pattern here, if we needed responses from star rating, color picker, or contact form, what we would do is, add them here. So we would say star rating response, and then have the response exactly get added just like this. For these other components though, we don't need it. We're just testing out this as a proof of concept for generative UI. So let's go ahead and continue. So that's our first two prompts. You can see how we're starting to speed things up a little bit. And now let's go ahead and update our client to store more information, right? So I've got this all planned out. We do want to be saving these messages over time. If we look at the client, we have this simple messages TypeScript interface. Let's go ahead and enhance it, right? We need some more information. We need to be able to store responses and submissions. So let's just go ahead and grab this prompt and execute this on our client side. And we're just going to update this message type. And when we create these new messages, we're going to make sure that our code is actually, filling in all of these items here, right? So let's see that change gets synced in. And it's important to note with this 2-agent configuration, we have 2 Aider instances. With this setup, we can execute client and server prompts simultaneously. If I wasn't filming this video, that's what I would be doing, right? I'd be going top to bottom. I'd run these both at the same time. Unless there's some context conflict, then we can just stream these both down side by side and execute them together, right? Okay, so that changed, got submitted there. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening here. So the great part about planning everything out is that we can just take a look at what step we're on in our feature building process, and then just review the code that was generated, right? So we're gonna go ahead and check our message to see if we have these new fields. ID, created at, component type, so on and so forth fields. We have our new generate ID function. We can search this and see this getting used throughout. So when we submit a new message, we're getting that brand new message attached. And let's go ahead and run this. Let's see if all of our responses are still looking okay. Let's say hello. Okay, so we can see that this is coming back all right. So let's go ahead to step 3. So here we're actually going to create our UI components and our dynamic component. We have all these steps laid out, and we're just once again going to copy this. And you can see here we have these cool component generation prompts. So we're saying create source components, Gen UI text, one for each type. And at the bottom we have, update use component instead of raw text of response, right? So we're going to use the dynamic component instead. So let's go ahead and highlight these and go to our front end AI coding assistant, paste this in, fire that off. While this is running, let me just go ahead and show you how we're instantiating these Aider architect instances. If I click on Aider client, you can see this exact run command. So here we're running Aider with the Sonnet model, and we're running in architect mode. And then we have our editor model, also Sonnet model, and then we're running with yes always. So what is architect? The architect mode means Aider is going to run 2 prompts, right? This is going to be a prompt chain of length 2. And it's saying our first prompt is just going to be about drafting the changes. And then our second prompt is going to be about executing the draft changes. If I did not have yes always, I would have to constantly hit yes and confirm the change. By just having yes always here as a flag, this will have Aider draft the change using the Sonnet model in architect mode. And then once the change is ready and fully drafted, it will then pass it to the editor model, which will actually implement the changes. So by using a prompt chain of length 2, Aider is able to increase the AI coding accuracy by quite a substantial amount by having one model draft and one model execute. You can think of this as a manager builder pattern or a draft editor pattern, or as Aider, aptly put it, an architect mode. We've talked about prompt chaining quite a bit on the channel. I'll link a couple of videos if you want to learn more about prompt chaining and its more powerful varieties so that you can use it in your own agentic workflows. There are tons of variants of the architect editor prompt chain that can be used to improve AI coding even further. We'll explore that in upcoming videos. I'm really excited, and I want to wait till the official O1 reasoning model comes out, and then we'll explore a bunch of heavy hitting AI code generation using the architect pattern with O1 and then a fast, high quality editing model like Claude 3.5. You can imagine different variants of this pattern. For instance, we could have an architect, an editor, and a reviewer, or a mode where we have two architects and then a lead engineer that merges the best of both drafts, and then an editor, right? There's really no limit to the types of combinations you can make with agentic workflows like this. I really like that Aider took a little bit of risk and implemented one pattern like this that gives really concrete results. But I like that Aider is still keeping itself simple, lightweight, and unopinionated. This is how you build great AI agents. So that's what's going on in the Aider client. We're doing effectively the same thing in the Aider server. And let's go ahead and move on from that. Let's check out our generative UI components. If we look at our UI, you can see it generated 4 new components. We have this massive multi-file edit. We got all of these new components. We can open up the File Explorer and just see these, right? We now have Gen UI text, star, contact, and picker. Open up text. You can see we just have a text response and a submit button, and then some styling. So, it looks like Aider's doing a great job. It's running all the modern Vue 3 script setup syntax. That's great to see. Let's go ahead and look at the top level UI. So if we close script here, you can see we're now using the dynamic component, and it's really important to really plan out all your work and give your AI agents all the information they need to solve the problem you have. In this block, if we're not the user, we now have this v-else that's wrapping our dynamic component. If we refresh here, that documentation came right out of dynamic component.md. And so we have this cool dynamic component, and we're looking for a component type, and we want to make sure that it's in our component map. So it created a component map for us. Let's look at that. Perfect. So now we have a map from the component type to the actual generative UI component. And again, this is really great context management. We have 3 read-only files. So our client Aider coding agent can see our server files, but it does not edit them, right? So it knows that in our server.ts, and we can go ahead and just command click this. In our server TS, it sees these enum types, right? It knows that's what component type is going to be. And that means it knows that it can map them right here. Okay, so a lot of really awesome stuff coming together here. The tricky part is going to be seeing if our AI coding assistant mapped the message properly in the response, because this is just a little tricky in general. So let's go ahead and make a couple tweaks to this. And first off, let's just run it, right? So let's just go ahead and say hello. So let's see if we get our text component. Okay, so not quite. We need to modify the response here a little bit. What we really want to have happen is we want our component type to get set, and we want our component props to get set to this entire output block. So we can go ahead and just copy this, and we'll just paste it down here just for reference. This is not the correct response, so let's just go ahead and close this out. And all we want to do here, because remember, we're always going to be calling this tool call, so we're always getting this format back. So we can paste this, and then we can just tab this. This is giving us our response component type, and we can look at data here, right? We have this nice log message, and we have response. And all we want to do here is pass input into both of these. So not quite right, but close. So we want input, and then we want dot, and then we have component type, and then component props. We just want to pass everything into that. So component props is just going to be our input. So whatever is here, like text response, we just want that to stream in. So let's refresh, type hello. And now you can see we have our generative UI text component. We don't need submit here. Let's open up our AI assistant, and let's just say remove submit from Gen UI text. And I missed the T there, but doesn't matter. That's going to get removed and cleaned up. So you can see there we had the architect draft the change, and now we have the editor making the change. And so now this component is just text. Wonderful. So let's refresh and say, hello, how are you? So there's no reason to generate any other type of component here. So of course, this component type coming back is just a text component. But if we say, I want to leave a review, you can see here we now have our star component, right? Our rating component. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what this looks like. This was all generated in one shot by Claude upgraded. And we can review this prompt here. We can see here that it generated everything we needed, right? It created all these components and inferred based on all this context. This is why it's so important to specify the right context with your AI coding assistant. It inferred everything we wanted to have happen inside of our individual components, right? So now if I hit, let's see how this works now. If I hit 4, right, we can see that 4-star rating. And if I hit submit, we can see component submitted, type rating, value 4. So let's go ahead and look at that. We can now handle dynamic submission. Let's go ahead and create a quick prompt for this. So when we submit this, we want to update this function, update the temp bot message, right? And so our temp bot message is our most recent message. And all we want to do is set the submit response. Set submit response. So pretty simple. And let's go ahead and we can hold on this and we can see the architect and the editor making those changes for us. So architect drafts, editor writes the change. Okay, so we can see it finding that most recent message and saving this. Let's update the color. So we also have the color picker, right? So this is going to select the color picker and we have a little UI issue here. So I'll just highlight and I'll say update flex call. And now we can pick a color here and hit submit. And now that was submitted. So when we click submit, I also want to update the state of so there we go. We got that flex call change rolled in. So when I click submit, I also want to lock the UI, right? So that we don't keep making changes to the generative UI component. Update all gen UI components. When we have submit response, say response submitted, and then value, so that we can see what exactly was submitted in every message, right? Our AI coding assistant is going to, again, in architect mode, make all these changes, and then editor mode is going to actually write all the actual changes. So this is really incredible, right? That's quite a significant change to go through and add a submission text state to every one of these, to every one of our generative UI components. But you can see here, Aider on Sonnet 3.5 with architect mode is just plugging away, right? It had a clear draft to work with. It can see all these files. It has the right prompt. Now it's just working through all the changes. Wonderful. So that was submitted. So you can see there we have that submitted response and we can go ahead and update the color, run submitted response again. This will update the component. Awesome. So that looks good. What other component do we have? We have one more, right? So I want to contact someone. And if we type that, you can see here we have our submitted contact form, and response submitted should not show if there is no value. So again, we're just going to throw a prompt in here. Should not show unless there is a value. Hide it. Let's go ahead and just keep working through this. So I'll type Dan at indie.com message. And then if we hit submit, you can see we have that submitted value and property is going to get upgraded. That's awesome. So this video is getting really long. There's a lot of value here in writing out your specification prompts. Let me just show you one more thing here. Let's go ahead and create the SQLite database to save our messages. So what we'll do next is have our Bash Anthropic agent just do all this work for us, right? So we need a new SQLite database and we need a new table setup. And we want them to have, basically the exact same structure as our chat messages here, right? So here's our file editing agent. We'll open up our Bash agent and then we'll just copy this prompt here and fire this off. And the key thing here to look out for is this is going to generate server app.db. So it's going to create this brand new SQLite database in this file right here. So I'm going to hit enter there and then let's go ahead and watch our server directory. So the agent is making sure that the file exists. It's creating this. You can see the create table statement there. And that's it. It's done. So, we can test and, we can use the Bash agent to just validate for us, show all the tables generated in app.db. Perfect. I wanted to touch on this agent just at least a little bit to show how powerful this is. You can type in natural language and have your Bash agent accomplish tasks for you automatically in the terminal, right? So we just had it create an SQLite database at this specific file path and create a brand new table, right, with these specific columns. And it just did that for us, right? So this is right here. But this video is getting really long. I'm going to cut it here. You can see where this is going, right? We're going to set up load and save commands next. Here's the prompt for that. Basically, continuing down the same line, a great kind of low-level prompt specifying where things are. We're going to update the server to have these load and save endpoints. And then we'll have our Gen UI chat update to just call the load and the save on mounted and on key press, right? So you can see where this is going. I think we've gotten to the kind of core theme of this video. By creating a great comprehensive plan and by using AI agents, you can get a lot of work done with new AI coding paradigms like Ader's architect mode. You can just do a lot more. And when the O1 models are released, this trend is going to continue, right? We're going to continue seeing the amount of code you can generate go absolutely parabolic. And with O1 preview, which we're going to cover, I'm really excited to do a video on O1 when that drops for AI coding specifically, because the amount of code we'll be able to create with a very well planned out specification document, also just known as a plan, right? When you plan out all of your work for whatever feature that's coming up that you want to build and you have it in this document, I can almost guarantee you in the future, we're going to be able to just Control C this entire document, boot up in Ader window with the O1 model and pass this into it, and it's going to do all the work, right? It will literally do all the work that we're walking through right now. I've run this experiment with O1 preview. It gets close. You still need to kind of come in and, make improvements, make changes, make tweaks. But I do think with O1, we'll be able to write comprehensive plans that detail all the work we want done for a feature, for a tool, for an application. And then you just fire that off into a powerful AI coding assistant that can actually make the changes for you using a powerful reasoning model, right? Right now we have O1 preview. This gets us close. O1 is going to take us all the way. So I'm really excited for that video, November or December. So really stoked on that. And I hope you can see the power of planning in the age of generative AI, right? We have a team of AI agents that can do arbitrary work for us. In the beginning, we use our doc agent to pull in documentation, clean it up for us so that we can use it. And then we have 2 AI coding assistants, both on the server and the client side. It's nice to split up our agents like this so that we can run work in parallel. I'll have to create another video on that where I showcase that a little bit better. In this coding session, we were running very sequentially, but you can see where that can go, right? We have 1 instance on the server, we have 1 instance on the client, and then we can prompt at the same time in parallel. It's also great for reducing context. Our front-end Ader instance is only modifying and creating front-end related components while being able to read the server components thanks to Ader's read-only context management solution. And our server, of course, was really only looking at these 2 files. So specification, aka plan-based AI coding, is a huge advantage. I recommend you dig into. Not only are AI coding tools evolving, but models like the upgraded Sonnet 3.5 and soon the full O1 reasoning model will enable you to hand off 90%, if not nearly all of the coding process to your AI agent. The full version of O1 is going to push that AI coding developer workflow into reality. It's going to make that a real thing that we can do. You write a great document, you write a great plan, and frankly, you use your editor and bash tools to help you create your great plan by collecting, documentation, by collecting specific files that you need. And then you have a powerful reasoning model, execute that using a great AI coding assistant, build that change out. You use a powerful mode like Ader's architect mode so that you get a clean draft of everything that's going to happen. And then you have an editor model, something fast like Sonnet that can read through all the changes and actually make the changes for you. And that improves the performance even further, right? So you have a draft agent and you have an editor agent. The big theme for us moving forward here is more capable models that can reason, process, and generate output more accurately. That means we need to scale up our prompts and therefore scale up our planning abilities. If you enjoyed this video, drop the like, drop the sub to stay on the edge of what you can do and what you can build with these next level generative AI tools. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.